The Aesthetics of Leadership podcast, the look of leadership that is unmistakable.
Hello, hello.
Master Jack.
Oh, hello, I
Uh,
am. Here we are.
good, good evening, my friend. I know it's what, 8 o'clock here in the US and it's 8 p.m. over in Thailand. So, man, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thank you for putting it together. It's been a pleasure us just chatting up until this point, and I'm excited for the conversation that we're going to have.
Yeah, Jack, your spirit absolutely resonates with the beauty, the abundance, and the spirit of what's possible in this world. And you've made a transition of awareness to that space. I'm not saying it's perfect, but
And
man, looking in and digging into your story, you've had an incredible transformation, Jack, and in body, mind, and spirit. And I'd love to just share that story with the listeners who may not follow you on Instagram. What is there a Jack origin story that has gotten you to be in Thailand, working with some of the most incredible people and doing some of the most amazing influence in the world right now?
sure, I'm happy to start with Thailand. So I got out here October 20th. I landed in Phuket, and I had actually met a buddy of mine who's now probably my best friend in Miami. His name is Juan Gaskew. And we met through the gym and through the church this spring. I moved down to Miami in the summer of 2023. So we met this spring. We just hit it off. We had very similar stories. We were both in the online coaching space, and I just saw a connection immediately, and I saw God starting to work in our relationship. And we ended up going to a Christian concert about an hour north, a group called Elevation Worship. They're pretty well known. So we went to see them, and we had three just ridiculous God ordained encounters completely outside of the venue where we had run ins with different people, and the conversation of God and Jesus came up. And Juan had been telling me he was going out to Thailand at the end of the year. I'd always had a desire to go out to Southeast Asia, but I was kind of praying about, like, is this the right move? God, give me confirmation. And after we went to that concert, I just knew that I had to be out in Thailand because God was going to work with him, or excuse me, God was going to work between us out there in Thailand. So I was like, all right, I'm going. So I had a buddy who helped me. Um, I had a buddy who does like credit card hacking. So he showed me how I could basically fly business class for free to Thailand using my credit card points. So I did that, flew my first business class flight out to Thailand, and he set up the whole itinerary for me. And the day I booked my flight to Thailand, I actually had my first conversation with Timon, who I've been working with in the personal branding space, building my online platform. So that was super divine as well. I've always looked up to him, and been I resonated with Timon a lot as well because he had such a similar story as mine, and his walk with God resonated a lot with mine. So I was always inspired by him and the gentleness and the humility, but also the wisdom and power that he brought to how he shared his message. And now, we're out here spending time together, creating content, delivering a message. So it's been incredible. And I'll be out here until the end of December.
Wow, that's an incredible end to the story because I think you and I share that relationship with Timon. He's helped me as well. He's an incredible, humble soldier in this world. I just appreciate the journey that he's been on and his relationship with God that has created quite a platform of influence for him. And I see you right there as well, that when you become aware of the fact that we are spiritual beings living a human existence, if you can make that connection, your power source is truly unlimited. You're only limited by kind of what goes through the head up here. And I love that that Timon is sharing that journey and influencing so many other young people, such as yourself, into what's possible. I think it's amazing because there was a time in your life when you didn't necessarily have that awareness and the humanness that we can fall prey to plagued you and your possibilities. Um, and I want to go there, but Jack, you shared a post recently that I think resonated with me so much, and I wanted to start our deeper conversation with this that ties into your earlier story. Is you made a post that some men have already died. They have no vision, they have no purpose, and they're just living for the man who writes their paycheck. Wow. If it's the number one question I get as a personal development coach, it is men chasing purpose and not necessarily appreciating vision at the same time. So I'd love for you to kind of share your perspectives on vision and purpose and how they're intertwined and how you are discovering both for yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's an interesting perspective to take because I don't think I've thought about. There's a lot of similarities, and I think people can easily muddy the waters and call them one and the same in a lot of cases. And they're definitely not, even though there is, at least when I start to pull them apart and put them side by side, I immediately see more similarity than distinction. So I think I'll just take one at a time and then see where that brings me in terms of
Sure.
differences. I think the vision that you have is ultimately the vision for the person you feel like you're meant to be and the life that you feel like you're meant to live or that you want to live, right? So for people, it's different depending on where they're at from a spiritual perspective when we talk about vision. So if I talk about vision from a non-spiritual perspective, I would talk about what is the vision I have for the person I'm going to become and the life I'm going to live. That would be the vision. It's purely based on my desire, I would say. Then when you add the spiritual component, when you add the spiritual component, it's okay, what is the vision for the person I'm supposed to become and the life I'm supposed to live? And that is still in my heart, but it's being guided by some other connection. It's being guided by a relationship with, in my case, which is God. So, and typically that vision for our life, it's going to be aligned with the person we are. If we're aligned with God, the vision is going to be aligned with the person we are because God created us in our uniqueness. So typically our unique characteristics, say somebody is an incredible athlete or they're a really good entrepreneur. We enjoy those things, right? That's why we're good at them. Or rather we enjoy them because we're good at them typically. So typically our vision, what God calls us to do is in alignment with those skills, those things that we're good at that we typically enjoy. So there's not going to be conflict there. So I guess the vision would be like, where am I going with myself in my life? But then the purpose is more so people talk a lot about like what and why. I actually talk about it a lot myself, where what is probably more the vision, but the why is more so the purpose. It's like what's the motivation and the reason and the inspiration behind this. I think that's the true purpose. Purpose is like, why am I doing this? Why am I trying to bring this vision to fruition? So it's really, I would say the purpose is the why behind the vision, and it's more abstract than just something you can go and create in this season of life in what we call life. For me, like my purpose, I didn't know quite what the expression of it in a vision would be, but I always knew my purpose. I wrote it down a long time ago, was like to use my time, treasure, and talent to help other people, to serve other people, and wake up every day with passion and fulfillment for what I was doing. And if I woke up every day with passion and fulfillment for what I was doing, then there was probably a high likelihood I was using my time, treasure, and talent to serve other people. And then the vision, the expression of that in real life became clear at some point as I just continued, you know, through life, continuing to do what was in front of me, what the next opportunity was, where I felt I was being led. So, yeah, to summarize it all, I would say vision is kind of the what of your life, and purpose is the why, the motivation behind it.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, man, and that is deep. I'm breathing that one in. You said an important word. Well, you said a lot of important words, but one of them stood out as fulfillment. And I saw this recently in a purpose framework that Brian and Gabrielle Boucher call the purpose factor. And in summarizing that, the reason that people fail to appreciate their purpose is that it's a cycle, perhaps, that you have to your commentary, you have this natural uniqueness, you have these gifts that are to be expressed in the world, right? And those gifts, from a godly perspective, are supposed to serve other people. And when you do that, when you take your gifts and in acts of service, give them to someone else, what you receive in return is fulfillment. And that's the cycle. And if any of those parts are broken, then you're kind of left questioning and doubting and maybe not fulfilling your potential because the cycle's broken. Is that kind of how you see it? That purpose is a cycle rather than a destination? Because I feel like young men today are waiting to find purpose as if it's a pin on a map and then everything will be fine.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I love that cycle that you created with finding fulfillment. I haven't thought of it from that perspective, but I definitely, yeah, I can definitely relate to that connectedness. And I agree with you, there is seasonal purpose, right? So for me, at least talking from a career perspective, early in my career, I was a software engineer. So it was to establish myself in the tech space to build a solid resume where I had that background of working with not only startups and young entrepreneurs, but also working in a corporate environment. And now, just today, 5, 7 years later, I'm starting to see why, because now I'm in a position to help those people through what I'm doing now, which is completely different. But yeah, purpose is definitely seasonal. I pray for a time in my life where my purpose will shift more towards being a father and being a husband, and that will be where the majority of my time and effort is being spent. I also though do think of purpose as purpose can be really simple, at least from a perspective of somebody who follows Jesus and believes in God. Ultimately, if you believe in God, in Jesus, your purpose on earth is to love one another as yourself and to do everything for God's glory, right? So whatever it is, whether I'm raising a family, taking care of my spouse, um, building my business, it all should be done for God's glory. So that's, it can be simplified, but I know it's not as simple as that. But at least from a Christian perspective, if you bring it back to what is our purpose here, like whatever it is, it should be done for the glory of God.
Yeah, I think we miss that a lot. And maybe it is a misunderstanding, maybe a misalignment, maybe both of understanding our purpose here on earth, that is our divine creator's expectation of us, and then our appreciation of that, and then aligning we're co-creators down here on earth. Then how are we going to parlay that which we have into that glory that manifests itself in loving and serving other people? Man, if we just keep it on those axes, there's I would argue that suffering would be dramatically less. And I want your perspective on that, on human suffering right now. And I heard it recently said at a men's summit that I was at, that what would happen if we saw God in every interaction? And when I say every interaction, I mean with another person. That me meeting Jack Landry for the first time on a phone conversation without a substantial background or friendship or camaraderie. I saw God in you, and and in that moment, I wanted to honor Jack with his seeing God in me first. So reaching out, wanting a connection, that's God. That's me showing you God, wanting a relationship with Jack. And then in our conversation, I want to respect and honor you because I see God in you. What if we did that every day? See God in other people, but allow them to see God in us first. I just think it would be a drastically less suffering place. So I'd love your perspective on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so hard to do in our human nature to see the God in everybody because we're all flawed by nature as well. And we tend as humans to see the flaw in other people. We tend to see the flaws in other people before we even see them in ourselves. And I think if we could see the God in other people, always there would be less suffering because we would have a lot more sympathy and understanding for whatever that person may go through. If there's a flaw in them that is instigating us, we would have the compassion and we would have the discernment to see that that comes from a place of brokenness or a lack of maturity or ignorance, whatever it may be.
Hmm.
So that softens our heart rather than putting us in a place of being defensive or being angry or whatever the negative emotion is that we so often respond with. And we so often respond with in response to somebody's flaw. So I think we would have a lot less suffering there. And then also shifting into a place where we expect suffering and suffering is a reality of this world. And I don't believe that God makes you suffer, that he's like sending suffering down on us. I believe he will let you suffer. Like he's not going to save you from self-induced suffering. For example, if I'm continuing to use the vice of alcohol and suffer the consequences of that, he's not just going to pull me out of that, right? God will let us suffer. He won't make us suffer. He didn't make me drink all that alcohol and continue to black out, but he will let it happen because in the suffering is where the transformation eventually happens. So if we could shift to a place of suffering, we live in a broken world, suffering is a realistic part of that. But also biblically, it says, and I can't quote the exact scripture for both of them, but I believe they're different passages. One says, like, count it all joy, all trials, all tribulations. And then the second one says, don't be surprised when suffering comes your way. And just having that perspective, and rather than wanting to run from suffering, because we all like to be comfortable, we like things to feel good, we like to be experiencing joy and happiness always. So rather than trying to run from that suffering and get it to pass as quick as possible, if we're able to switch to a place of, I'm going to actually tune in here and see there's something that's supposed to happen here. There's some type of work, whether it's inner, whether it's external, whether it's healing a broken relationship. Something is supposed to happen. There's some evolution that should happen so that there's something that better that comes out of this at the end. So I think when you
Hmm.
can shift your perspective on suffering, you start to see more opportunity and create the opportunity for more good to come from things that begin as negative, but also, yeah, like you said, shifting your perspective on how you look at people. Like look at everybody as always genuinely good and realize if that goodness is not pouring out of them, that there is some brokenness in them, whatever you want to call it. It's different for every person that's blocking their goodness from coming forward. So that's kind of what I think about suffering and then how we view other people.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And Jack, I get a lot of questions around well, it's not questions, it's commentary from some of the people I support, and they talk about not having control. that I guess the harsh way of saying it is they have a victim mentality that they don't have power, therefore they are the victim of their circumstances, and the finger points everywhere but where maybe it needs to point. And you made a post about the three C's that I think was really meaningful. You talk about choices, chances, and changes, and I think you said you must make a choice to take a chance or your life will never change. And uh, chance to me sounds like risk, and risk is a scary word for people. You've made some incredible transformation choices that were very risky, that have led to substantial change in your world. And the Jack that was to the Jack that is, I think, is a testament, not only to the big cheese, but also to your locus of control that you have now owned. That is your personal brand, not your business brand, but your personal brand seems to be founded in three C's, and now you're getting a return on investment. It, is what I'm seeing fair?
Yeah, that's definitely fair, and I appreciate you saying that because it's I've been blessed to be able to step in that position and take those chances, and it has resulted in change, but it's always started with a strong will for me. I've When I decide I want to do something, I always need to figure out how to get it done. So just because I've seen that really anything is possible, and there's minor limitations on certain things. Like I wanted to play in the NFL. That was my dream. And we we got as close as we could with our physical abilities. But for the most part, it's really just a matter of will and effort and putting in the time and commitment. And I just saw that, especially studying a lot of people who have had what we would call and consider success in all different types of areas, business, athletics, um, and they always just they had a will, and they committed first and foremost. But something really that I saw early in my career and really early in my life was, I call them the big three. I call them the big three, and they're all related to fear. So it's the fear of the unknown. We're afraid to do something we haven't done because we don't know what to expect. It's pretty simple. We're afraid to do something that's uncomfortable because by nature we like things that we're used to, that feel similar, that we know what's going to happen. So it's the fear of the unknown, fear of discomfort, and then fear of failure, right? Because our ego gets in the way. We get worried about how we're going to feel. We get worried about how we're going to feel if we fail. We get worried about how people are going to perceive us. I think that's the bigger one if we fail. But ultimately, what I've learned is the biggest growth and transformation is by stepping into those three avenues of fear: the unknown, the discomfort, and the failure. Because in any of those, you're going to be forced to grow, you're going to be forced to learn. And that creates this transformation, this evolution, where the only other option is to not choose to step into one of those variants of fear. And what happens when you don't choose to step in is you stay right where you are. So you stay in the known, you stay comfortable, and you have no risk of failure, but nothing changes. So it's like, either unless you're completely satisfied and content with exactly where you are, then it's a requirement for any type of growth and transformation and evolution. And it's scary, don't get me wrong, but the more and more you do it, you see the growth, you find some type of victory, you see some type of learning and knowledge acquiring, and you grow, and you get more and more confident in your ability to do more and more challenging, more and more fear invoking things. And then you just start to live that way. And so once I did that a couple times, I just realized that was the path. And every time I see a big challenge and I have a strong desire in my heart, I just know that's the way.
Wow, fascinating. And I can imagine, Jack, as an engineer. that things have to line up, right? And there's an outcome, and it's deconstructed into all the key pieces that make that a success. Because if you get the code wrong here, then the outcome is not what was desired. And I have a very similar makeup in that I need to know all the steps, not the next one. And it's really the only one you need to be worrying about. But I find myself forecasting and future casting all the other steps necessary. And man, that becomes quite a burden. And I can see where that can stop someone. Is that your engineering mind? Is that how it shapes up? And if so, how did you focus just on the next step, not every other one of them to carry the burden? And if no, how have you made the transition to just look at the next step?
Yeah, that's a powerful question and such a challenge for a lot of people. And that's exactly where I was. So 2020, I had moved from Boston. My first job was with Fidelity Investments. Then I moved from Boston to San Diego. I took a job with Amazon Web Services. And that was when I really dove deep into personal development. I was also trying to draw closer to God, but that's when I was really diving into the personal development. So I was reading a lot of books, and I always took notes on these type of books, and I would even do the activities if some of them prompted you to. But I got to a point after about a year when I had done all of this work and I had put a vision on paper and I had ideas of what I wanted to do, but not a lot had changed. There had been a ton of self-reflection. There had been a ton of just time spent meditating on where I wanted to go with different areas of my life. But ultimately, I was seeing, and I read it a couple places too, that action, nothing changes unless you're taking action. And I had done a lot of that deep work, but I was frustrated with myself because I was like, dude, you're doing so much planning. I have a bit of a perfectionist side, and yeah, the engineering aspect as well comes out where it's like we want to have everything perfectly architected so that when we get to implementation, we know it's going to work. So that's how I was with most things in these bigger visions. But then I realized I just needed to start with one small thing. And there was a couple of things that stood out to me. The phrase stacking small wins. Small wins was from the book The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. And then I also used it's called Living Your Best Year Ever or something like that. It's a very intensive, like yearly planner slash journal. And that was powerful for me. And then I forget where I heard it. It might have been Hardy as well, but it was the acronym MINS, MINS, stands for most important next steps. And essentially it was like you just have to figure out what that is today. But even within the day, okay, what is my most important thing right now? Like for me, that's having this podcast, having this interview, being as engaged and present as I possibly can be right now for us to have a powerful conversation, and just consistently looking at everything from that lens of what's my most important thing. Because once you have the overarching vision, it's gonna somewhat change, but it's like the guiding North Star. And it's enough direction where you should be able to work backwards. Such an Amazon thing. They talk about working backwards, reverse engineering, work backwards to today. And then what do I need to do right now just to move the ball in that direction? And once I started to shift into that mindset, because I was like, action delivers. That's what gets it done. And so I really had to force myself to like only go also with like 70 or 80% of the information because I realized you're never going to be fully prepared. You're never going to have it all. And I was always the person who wanted the full game plan 100%. And nothing in life is like that. And I just had to make that switch to like, okay, if I have enough, then it's time to go.
So good. Listening to you reminds me of Stephen Kotler's work with the Flow Research Collective. He wrote The Art of Impossible, Becoming Superman, etc. And he talks about the goal stack, that the most effective way for flow to be instigated is when clarity is present. And how often do we go on a strategic planning retreat with ourselves and our goals, such that we have the what does he call it? The massive transformative purpose. That's the in a domain of life, that is the reason why you are wanting to do what you do. It's huge. It's bigger than you. It's outside of you. And then once that has been established, the creation of high, hard goals are those stepping stones that would get you in the deconstruction process. Those are the stones, the milestones that get you to that MTP, the massive transformative purpose. And then once you have clarity on the milestones, you can then create action steps that appear in your calendar that move you, to your point, in what you can take action on now, the men's that you mentioned. I think that is so true. I think neuroscience has proven exactly what you said, that if we can get it down to that granular space in the context of the bigger architecture, that's where the magic is. So you can create milestones, but you don't have to have every step of every milestone. You just need the next one is the most important one. But you have to have clarity on where you're going. And I think that goes back to our vision commentary. Um, so getting off my soapbox, Jack, you made another post, and it was, I think what caught my eye was the poetry that was in the art of what you posted. And I believe you're standing in the rain or something, and your arms are back, your head is up to the sky, and you're saying, I think it's growth, that everyone wants growth, but they're unwilling to weather the storm. And man, that was just a smack in the face for me, that our going back to our three C's, the failure to make the choice in the storm is probably what paralyzes everyone. That's the consistent issue that men are suffering from right now, is we want growth, but we're unwilling to weather the storm. And to see you in the rain, it was almost joyful that you were standing in the rain and saying, "Come on, storm, you're the buffalo running through the storm." It was so poetic, man. I'd love for you to talk about that moment and what inspired that vision that came through as just a smack in the face for me. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I try to let all pieces, the audio, the visual, and the written message work together so it can be fun sometimes. And it's similar to that conversation we had a little bit about the three different types of fear and just realizing that growth, the only way to growth is through fear. And
Mm,
those things, comfort, failure, and the unknown. But actually heard an analogy from a pastor down in Texas. His name is Jerry Flowers. He's fantastic, and was talking about kind of growth in relationship to the metaphor of a storm as well, and kind of talked about it from this perspective, which is growth is required, or rather, enduring the storm, diving into the storm is required to actually see growth. And you can think about it like a seed. So you plant a seed, but then that seed is not going to actually grow and to transform into something bigger unless the rain comes, unless the storm comes. But it's not just the growth process that the storm is helping with. The rain is not just nurturing this plant so that it can grow into bigger, so that it can grow into something bigger. The powerful piece that he talked about was what's happening in the storm. When that rain comes down, it's washing all of the debris, it's washing the leaves off of the surface of the ground so that that plant can sprout through. And it's the idea that in the rain and in the storm, everything from our old self that needs to go, that needs to be transformed or burned up in the flames, or however you want to talk about it, those things that need to be left behind, those shackles that need to be broken, the vices that need to be left, that all gets washed away. But you have to be willing to dive into the storm. And then once that preparation is done, now you're in a place for the actual sprouting to happen, for the growth to happen. So yeah, that was so powerful for me to hear. sure, we need the water to grow, but also the water as like a preparation process to get rid of everything from our past to prepare us for the elevation. That was super powerful for me.
Yeah, that is so good. So I think that's another important point to talk about, Jack, is I appreciate the metaphor of water washing things away in order for the plant to grow and see the light. Um, I I guess I think that that is also a choice we have to make in letting go of those things that no longer serve us. And
Mhm.
man, I bet that can be hard. And I know you've experienced that. I know I have, but I'd love your perspective on letting go and letting go of not only people, but things that no longer serve you, and your perspective on how important that is to drop the anchor and let it sink.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done. And it was in a different handful of different avenues. A lot of the times it was with vices, letting go of them, even if it was in a moderate capacity. A lot of the times, probably the most difficult way and probably the most difficult place we have to let go is in relationships. Sometimes even of people we love, because there's not alignment there anymore. And the thing is, if you're aligned and you do have that clarity on your vision, you start to quickly see what's not in alignment with you moving in that direction. So you start to see the things in the people that you need to say no to. And if you don't say no to them, you'll constantly feel this resistance because you're trying to head towards the vision, but whatever it is pulling you off that track. And so either you try to endure and you stay in this constant state of tension and conflict, or you realize you have to let go. You have to, like you said, drop the anchor. And as soon as you do, you start to see the full alignment and kind of the trajectory upwards towards whatever it is you're heading towards, even if that's just a person that you're meant to be, right? Maybe an individual or a situation in your life, a job is not in alignment with who you know you're supposed to be anymore. Once you let that go, you'll start to feel the freedom and the weight literally being let go because you're now able to actually move in the direction you feel you're supposed to be. So it's so powerful. I always say saying no is a superpower. And whether it's saying no to somebody in a relationship and walking away, or saying no that you're not going to do things an old way anymore, or even just what's the word for it? Probably just, being a little bit more intentional with how I spend my time with people. A lot of us, we like to make the people around us happy, especially the ones we care about, but sometimes you can't do everything with everybody, even if they're close to you. So saying no to spending time even is going to be required for a lot of people so that you can focus on these other things that are important to you. And um, it's it's not a selfish thing, but it is a thing of self-love and self-respect that if I'm not stewarding myself and loving myself, then ultimately I'm not going to be and have the capacity to fully give to somebody else because my tank is not where it needs to be.
Wow, that was good. Um, so Jack, I know you're just off of a 40 plus hour fast. Talk about giving up and your tank being empty. The reason for the fast and what you learned or received over those 40 plus hours.
Well, I'll be honest, the thing that triggered me to do it was my body was just a little bit unhappy. I've been out here in Thailand for a couple of weeks, was definitely feeling a little bit bloated and inflamed. And also, I have an interesting relationship with food, and I'm in a place where it's healthy, but because, especially in the past 3 years, I've spent so much time in this bodybuilding area where I competed 2 summers ago, and then I try to keep my physique a certain way. I'm always tracking my food. I know every calorie that's going into my body. the nature of it is very, very obsessive. So it's like, how do you live this strict lifestyle, but still maintain a healthy relationship with it where it doesn't take control and it doesn't become an idol? And I just found myself in this new place, always looking forward to the next meal, always thinking, what am I going to eat? And then just often eating like a little bit more than my body needed. And I just felt like the food was becoming a little bit of an idol in the past couple weeks. And I don't necessarily feel like it was pulling me away from God, but fasting for me only recently in the past year has become a way to kind of return to God and silence the noise and the distraction because you have less distractions. You're not eating, so there's less distraction actually in your physical being. There's less going on, but there's also less outside of you because you're not sitting down. You're not thinking about what am I going to eat. You're not having to go to the grocery store or whatever it is. So there's less externally and there's less internally, which then creates this space for more reflection, more quietness, stillness, and peace. And at least from my experience, where you find that true connection with God and are able to hear his direction, which is not an actual spoken word. It's just kind of it's like a clarity and alignment. It's like that internal gut feeling, that indwelling of the spirit with less noise and less distraction and in the stillness. That's where I found that's where I found the direction from God. So I saw the food looking a little bit like an idol. I want to continue to denounce anything in my life that continues to, or excuse me, I want to denounce anything in my life that presents itself as an idol. I always want God to know that He's first. And more than that, I need to actually live like that. So when something is starting to have control, I need to kind of reestablish authority over it and also surrender everything back to God. So with the fast was this act of, okay, God, I'm enjoying the food here. I'd probably like to keep eating, but I'm going to surrender this to you. I feel like it's kind of on my heart to step away to get a little bit of silence and clarity right now and just reduce the noise. So that was the main reason I did it. And my main intention, sure, from a physical perspective, just to cleanse. But when I go into that fast, I'm very intentional about spending more time in prayer, more time in gratitude and abundance and thankfulness, and more time on my knees, just listening in worship and asking God to guide me. And if He has a word or something for me, then to send that as well. And I even felt like I got kind of it was Matthew 6:19 came to mind last night as I was winding down and planning on spending a little extra time in prayer and worship that I usually wouldn't. And Matthew 6:19 came to mind, and it was, don't lay up your treasures on the earth, lay them up in heaven. And it really just speaks well to the physical and the food thing. It's like there's nothing here, so why are you valuing all of these things so much? So it resonated and it hit and it made sense. And that's something I need to do. And it's actually very challenging as somebody who's ambitious. I'm sure you can relate, is we have ambitions, which are not necessarily a bad thing, but we want to grow and find success and help more people and often make more money. I definitely have a desire to make money, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but these ambitions can easily become the leading desires of our hearts, and then in that sense, they become idols. So consistently returning to God and like humbling yourself in front of Him, and that reminder to like lay up all my value, all my hope in the Lord was just a good reminder and kind of what I was trying to do with stepping away from the food and something that felt like it had control.
Incredible. I'm realizing my invite for you to be on the show came during the fast when you were trying to be quiet. And I guess it's making sense why you at first said no, this it's not a priority right now. There are other things that are a priority. I totally get that. You were trying to be quiet, but you said yes eventually. I'm curious the change from no, not now to yes. Um, I caught you during a time of quiet. So I'd love your perspective on that.
Yeah, it just came from, I would say, I think I felt like I had my eyes opened up a little bit and a little bit of wisdom shared with me where I was seeking out wisdom. And I think I understood the posture of your heart, which I didn't, to be honest with you, I didn't spend a lot of time kind of trying to understand where you were coming from. And the social thing is actually new for me. This account I only started in August, so it's been some pretty dramatic growth. But for the first time, I'm in a place where I'm talking with a lot of people all the time, and it's incredible. It's a blessing. And then but I do have a lot of people reaching out to me with real value and us having genuine conversations like you and I had been having. But then I also have a lot of people, to be honest, who are just wasting my time.
Yeah.
So it's been like finding this balance. And yeah, I was actually talking with Timon and we sat down. It was the second to last meal that I had that before I went into the fast. It was kind of one of the ones that triggered it. But I was talking to him that you and I had had a conversation, and I know you and he had spoken before, and he was just saying how well, I was telling him, I just could, I could tell you you're a good man and you have a good heart and you're walking with the Lord, all these things. So I was kind of sharing that, and he was confiding in me that he agreed. And just after that conversation, I just felt like it was something that I should do. And I kind of saw the posture of your offer, and I thought this could be a great thing to do. This man has a lot of wisdom and has a good soul, and I've appreciated his genuineness. So, yeah, I kind of stepped away from the speed and gave it its thought, and then also let some other wisdom in, and then it seemed just we should do this. So I was like, let's do
Oh,
it.
wow. You are a champion and hero in my eyes, sir. Thank you for that. This is a gift to spend this time with you, and I'm so thankful for the conversation. Number one, I think the listeners are going to gain great value and receive great love and spirit from you in this conversation. And I'm so thankful. I appreciate the time, attention, and intention you put in this conversation, and I certainly hope we can have more. Jack, you are a light in this world. Keep shining that light. It is of value, and I see you. So, thank you, brother.
I
You're a
appreciate it.
hero in this world.
Thank you, Dr. Edwin. I appreciate you as well, your brothers. So thank you so much.